Welcome to another PAT tip. If you're doing IT as a subject in South African schools, then you obviously know about a practical assessment task, which you need to do to get 25% of your final mark at the end of the year. So let's talk about the PAT, and we're looking at the phase 1 document. We've done previous videos on how to get started and how to do the other parts of the video. Now we get to what I think is the one big thing that a lot of students end up losing marks on. And so if we can just structure our document properly and understand what we need to do, let's try and maximize as many marks as we can for the IPO table. So let's get into it. So what do you want us to do for this IPO, or input processing output part of the software tool? So we're looking at an overall solution considering all the parts of the project. We want to talk about the formats and the data types and all this detail about the input and the output and that. We want to talk about what processing is being done, and we want a clear description to indicate the input processing output requirements for at least 2 of the main interfaces, or that's what they want for 2022's PAT. So 2 main interfaces, at least 2. So you need to take 2 of your screens that have got the most things that are happening in the program, most calculations being done or most inputs being done. That's going to help you because you meet all the requirements. If you don't meet all the requirements for 2 screens, then you might have to do this again for a 3rd screen just to make sure that you get all of the marks. So let's look at the rubric. Now the rubric is quite intense. It's almost over 2 pages worth of stuff that we need to get. So we're going to start off with the input part, and so let's get the document set up first. So I'm going to go to my document. If you remember, we were starting with this document. We did all of this lovely stuff beforehand. If you don't know what this is, it's because you haven't watched the previous videos. So go watch the previous videos so you can see all the details. We even did screens. I did a fake little screen. Yeah, this is a terribly designed screen. Please don't design something like this. Give better names and better design. So you design a nice little screen. So let's pretend we want to use this screen in our IPO. So now we're at the bottom of our page. Now the lovely little thing about this, so let's just put a little enter here, is we want this to be on another page. But we probably need a lot of stuff. So I actually want the page to not be portrait. I want it to be landscape. So I want some sort of effect like this. If you look at the rubric, you see how the rubric goes from landscape, and if I go up, and now it's in portrait at the top. So I want to create that type of effect. And if you don't do CAT, you might not know this. So let's try and show you how to do that quickly. So I'm going to go here to design. I think it's design. Okay, we're going to go, no, it's not design, it's layout. That's the one you forgot where it is. It's layout. Click on layout. Now, do you see these breaks here? Now, it's not the normal insert break. We're going to go layout break, and I'm going to come over here, and I want to insert a section break. So if I type in a section break, now you look, and there's a brand new page. Now you say, Mr. Long, that doesn't do anything. But if I click on this new page, and I change its orientation to landscape, what's beautiful about this is it will change just this page, hopefully, if it does what I want it to do. So you must do a section break, not a normal break, otherwise it won't work. So if we do that, okay, so now you see the page, but my pages above it are still portrait. So there we go. So now we've got a nice little, a little bit of wide screen. We got a little bit of wide screen, and so this is going to be obviously our, what is our IPO stuff, IPO table. So there we go, and this is going to be interface, or let's go screen 1. Screen 1. Now you could insert the screen here as well, but it's obviously going to cause a bit of a conflict with the spacing. So what I like to do is say screen 1, and you can say this is login screen, whatever, describe what the screen is, and you want to, like, if they want to see what that screen is, hey, I want that's that screen there. What I'm going to actually do is I'm going to click on this one, and I'm going to actually insert a bookmark, a link, a bookmark. There we go. I'm going to make this a link, a bookmark. So we're going to do both a link and a bookmark. So this is my bookmark. This is where I want it to go to. So I'm saying, hey, this is a bookmark. This is a login screen. I'll just call it login screen. That's it is. That's this particular image. Click add. So there I've added a bookmark. So now when I come down here to the login screen part, just that, I'm going to make that link to the particular place. So existing place, no, we want to go to a place in this document. We want it to go to our login screen bookmark. So now it's a link. So when I click on it, it'll take me to that screen if the user ever wants to do that. So that's a nice little thing we can do there. So some nice CAT tools we're learning here. So first of all, we want to do our input. So the input part is our subheading. So we can do input, and I'm going to need to create some sort of table that does all the input. So what do they exactly want? Let's look at the structure of what they want. They want an input. They want the source of the input. So we obviously need to label what the input is. That's 1. We need the source. That's 2. We need to know the data type. That's 3. The format is 4. And the component used is 5. So we've got about 5 columns there. And then there's this validation for the input as well. So that's technically 6. I think 6 columns should be fine. So let's think about the 6 columns should be fine. So we'll do 6 columns for the data input. So what I'm going to do here is under input, I'm going to insert a table of 6 columns and obviously go down a couple of things. So we're going to do something like this. So let's have a look. So first of all, we want the actual input, the input detail or the input type, or let's call it input. That's fine. So we're going to have the input. So that's going to be what are we inputting, or we want to get the username from the user or the password or whatever like that. So you can do something like that. The username when they log in. Something like that. So, okay, so we can make that a bit smaller because we're going to need some space for the other columns. Then they want me to have the source, not the catch-up, the source of the input. So where is it coming from? So you're going to use the words keyboard, text file, array, or database, where we get this input from. So this is going to be the source of it, and that's going to be from the keyboard. So it could also, so you can just write the word keyboard. The other words that you could use was, as they said, text file. It could be text file. I'm going to put, it could be, I'll put it on a new one, e.g. text file, database. What else do they say? There could be. Your data could come from text file, could come from a database, could come from an array. So wherever we're getting the information for this particular information, we can say where it's coming from. So I'll just use some examples. So in our case, the username is coming from the keyboard. The user is going to be typing that in. And then we're going to need to know, I think it was the data type. It was data type. Data type was the other one. So we're going to come here and type data type. This will obviously be very short, so we can actually make that a bit smaller because those words are going to be short. So data type. This can also be quite small because it's just going to be text in this case. Or what do they say? String. They can say, we can say what data type. You can say the word string. Let's keep to the Delphi components. So string, you could say integer or whatever the data type is. And then we need to know the format of the string. Not there. The format over here. The format. Now this is particularly important if you've got like maybe you got a comma separated string, so you want to say it's name, comma, surname, comma, whatever. If you're getting some sort of data that's coming in, they specify the format of the type. If it's a date, if it's gender, it must be M or F. So anything that's got to relate it to the format. So it's just general text. So you can say just general text in this case, I would say. Any text or general text. So you could do something like that. But obviously if it was gender, then you would say it must be an M or an F. If it's a format, if it's a date, it's YYY. For example, you go YYY. So you can say what the format is of the date. You could do something like that. So anything along the format line, so we can do that. So that would be the general format. And we got that, and then we are going to get the format, and then the component that is used if we are getting it from a component, if it's getting from a keyboard or something like that. So then I'm going to go, okay, well, that's let's make this a bit shorter because that's also not going to be too long. And then we're going to get the GUI component. Is that what they called it? Make this a bit smaller. BDD. I'm actually going to make that a bit bigger because I need more space there for the validation. This is where I want to put my validation. Okay, because there's lots of validation happening. So we can do that. I can actually move this. Can I move this up a bit just to make more space? But you can obviously make this a bit wider here, and then you can obviously get more space. So because space is a premium here. So let's do that. Let's make that a bit smaller. There we go. Let's go do all this formatting. So we got more space for our validation because that's going to require a bit of writing and that. So let's do that. So, and then the component is going to come from EDT username. Okay, just a little tip, like in your screens, you might have username on multiple screens. So what I tend to do is I tend to call it EDT login username. So the login username, so the username on the login screen or the username on the register screen. So just make sure you're quite descriptive, otherwise you can have lots of username components. So there we go. So there's our lovely little table. I think that'll be fine for what we want to do. Make that a bit bigger. Boom, there we go. So you can fill that stuff in. Not that, just make that one a bit bigger there. you can fill that stuff in just to make sure that it all fits in nicely. So I would fill that in for that particular screen. So you would look at your screen. Okay, so that edit box is getting the username. So we want to fill in the username, all the different things that are being inputted into that screen. If there's information coming from a text file or a database, then obviously you would say that's coming from the database and the type. Obviously that wouldn't have a GUI component, but you get that type of idea. So you can write those in. Sometimes it will be blank. Obviously if it's coming from a text file, there isn't a GUI component for that. But you can at least have the data type and the format and all that. So specify all the details for that particular screen. So if we do that, what are we going to do? We're going to obviously, for at least two interfaces, so you can do this twice almost. You're going to do this for one screen and then do this for a second screen. And so you list all the inputs for it, all the details and stuff like that for the most common screens. And then the validation. So it says that you must at least describe all 4 points. So all 4 points must be done for all your inputs. So make sure that every input has got that data. Now, for the validation, to get these marks, we must have at least 4 different data types validated. So you want to add, so different data types must be done. At least 4 inputs validated, okay? And that can be, you can check if it's not blank. You want to test that if they've typed in if it meets a requirement. You could do check to see that there's a check digit. You could do lots of type of validation. And we want to know what are the error messages if they violate that. So we want to highlight those particular things, at least 4 data types. So you're not going to have necessary validation on everything here, but you could have something on. So let's pretend, I'm going to just pretend we've got the password there. Okay, so if this was the login screen, then obviously the validation is we want to check if the username is blank. Okay. And you can describe why. Okay, if the username is blank, then they haven't for example, so they want us to describe it. So what do they mean? At least 4 types validated. What do they say in the details here? So we want to specify the validation. So just describe what exactly you want to do. If the username is blank, then they haven't, then it's an error or they haven't filled in. You can write like pseudocode here if you want, technically, just describing exactly what type of validation or what the rules are for that. If the username is blank, it's a problem. They can't log on. They can't log in. They must fill it in. So you can do some sort of describing what that validation is. And then underneath it, what I would do is I would have error message. Error message, and you can then describe your error message over here. So if you're using message DLGs, what I would do is describe what the message is. So please fill in your username, and then I would put in brackets say that's an empty error that I would use if I was using a message DLG. If you don't know message DLGs, go to our video on that. That will help you. So you could do something like that. Or you could actually go and physically create what it would look like using just a message DLG in a program, and then you could screenshot and put that error message over there if you wanted to do something like that. So you could do something along those lines. And then for the password, it must be, the password validation, it must be longer than 8 characters. I think this is what you would probably do on your registration screen. You want to check that the password's valid. Must be 8 characters, must contain, so you can do that, must be 8 characters, must contain a capital letter. So whatever you want to do must contain a number. And then you can do what the error message is if they violate that particular what's name. So you can give the rules and so on. So you could do something along those lines for your validation. If you do that, what is it that they actually want? They want to have at least 4 different data types validated. Make sure that you have got the right date. Have you got the right string? Have you got the number that's in the right range? If you type in gender MF, is it one of those options? Things like that. Remember, your validation could also be, for example, from a radio group. So the user's got to select one of the options, and that's how you check in it. Or if they've entered a radio group, what happens if they haven't selected one of the options? And then at least 4 inputs that are validated, including if it's left open or if it's got a particular value, and then obviously your little error messages. So do something along those lines. So that would be my input screen. Okay, and then over here, we would now do our processing. Let's do processing. So what do we want for processing? Oh, it's still long. Let's make that all capitals. There we go, that's better. Okay, so for processing, let's go to that. For the P part of the processing, they want what processing needs to be done and how it's done. Now, look here, at least 8. So go back to your particular rubric. This might be different for your year, but look here, at least 8 processes to be done. What processing must be done? So at least 8. And how the processing does, so clearly describe how the 4 processes will be done. So this is just listing what the processes are, and this is describing 4 of them. So you only need to list 4, but describe 4, list 8, describe 4. Now, again, this comes into context with regard to your screens. Over your 2 screens, you need to have 8 processes and 4 ones that are described. If you don't have 8 and 4, my suggestion is to go get another screen, a third one, so that at least you meet all 8 processes over the 3 screens and at least 4 over the 3, for example. The same with your validation. Make sure that you get all those validations over the multiple screens so that you've got a total of over both of them. So we want just those 2 things. Well, that's easy. I'm going to just insert a table with 2 columns, make them the same width as the ones above it so that it's nice and spread out. And so for this screen, I'm going to talk about here, they talk about the what. I'm going to copy this text. What processing needs to be done? I'm going to copy that text and paste it in here. Just paste it. Can we paste it? I don't know. I don't want to be able to. What processing needs to be done? Needs to be done. And this is the how. How processing will be done. Is that what they wanted? Is that the wording they used? It's not to how processing will be done, what processing will need to be done. So there we go. So you write those headings there. We're going to make that nice and bold. Make that a bit bigger. And then here you can list. So, okay, obviously what process needs to be done on the login screen. We need to check the username and password match with data in the database, Maybe that is your check in there. Maybe if it was a registration screen, the processing would actually be technically this validation to check that, hey, have you met all these requirements? What process needs to be done? We can then go like maybe on when you want to update your details, you want to get details and edit profile, edit values in the database. So you can write down what your main processes are going to be. So hopefully you can get at least 8 over your 2 screens. So list your different processes as you go along there. So maybe you got 5 on this screen and 3 on the other, then you've got them all listed. So all the different processing that needs to be done. As I said, you might need to go to a third screen if it doesn't fit all 8 on the 2 that you've got. So that's your process. Now the process that needs to be done, this is where you would do the actual pseudocode or how it will be done. So you can write it in pseudocode. Maybe you want to write the code ahead and go paste it in. You could do that as well. So you can then go, obviously we want to go through a database. So you got your ADO table, TBL users dot first. So you can write this as pseudocode, or you can actually write the actual code while not TBL users dot end of file. So you can do it as pseudocode, as I said, just write it words, and then we're going to say if the TBL users, dot username, you can, obviously that's not the correct code, but you can, is equal to the S, obviously the username's coming from a particular variable, so we could also call that S username, is equal to S username. Then so we want the TBL users dot password. Now I'm using dot password. Obviously you would use square brackets, but you get the idea. If that is equal to S password, because that would be S password, then you can then do what you need to do. Then you write down and you can even write, as you said, unlock this particular tab, make this visible, those types of things. And if it's not, then display error message, so things like that. So you can write the processing for 4 of the 8 that you've got. So if you do that, you can get all your processing done. Okay, see, we're stretching onto another page already, but you get the idea. So there we go. Okay, and then on the next page, I'm going to put in a page break just for this particular screen. So we're going to insert a page break. We don't need a section break because it's all still part of this section. And this would be the output. And now for the output, Let's look at what they want. So we got that. We got that. Output is simple output interfaces of at least two outputs. What's being displayed to the user. So we want the output, we want the format, and we want the component that's being used. So that's 3 things. So I'm going to insert a table of 3, and again make them the same size. This one won't be as full as necessarily the other one, so you can do something along those lines. And so what do they want? They want the data that needs to be output. So that's the actual, okay, so what data has been output, so the actual output, the data. And they want the format. I think it was the format. So let's look at the format, and they want the component. So they want the format, and they want the component. What did we say? GUI component. I'm going to keep it consistent with the rest of my document. So let's put it over there and paste it in. There we go. And then make these headings obviously bold and underline as well. There we go. So there we go. So yeah, you would write down what's being outputted. So maybe you've got maybe a message that's been popped up. Maybe there is a memo control. So for example, we could have the data that's been output. We're going to have a summary of the data. So we got the name, surname, details, and count. I don't know, for whatever you count in that. The format, you can say, okay, so it would be name, and then the name, the actual name field. If you want, say, in text, then you can, maybe on a new line, you want surname, and you say name field, surname field. I would do something along those lines. And then we want details. And then I'm going to say, hey, we're going to put a tab in. So I'll put a tab so I can see the format, and then I'll say this is the count variable. Something along those lines. So you can specify what the format's going to be, and the component that will be in memo details. Maybe there's a memo that's got details on it. You can say type T memo. Okay, so I would do something along those lines for your output. So every time you want to display something, every time you are using information that's being given to the user, go along those particular lines for the output. Okay, so there we go. I think we've ticked all the blocks. Have we ticked all the blocks? So we've done all of that, provide a clear description of at least 2 main interfaces. So as I said, you would do this, and then you can copy all of this again, and you would go and paste it for the next one. But before I do that, I'm going to first make that a heading 1. And I'm going to, I'll leave that, and I'll actually make that a subheading. I'll make that a subheading because you could have multiple headings. So let's go. I'm going to copy all of this. Oh, did it go too far down? Yeah. I'm going to copy all of that. I'll just make this a bit smaller. Oh, there we go. And then on a new page, so come over here and do a new, insert a new break, page break. And over here, I would then go and paste everything again. And so this is obviously my second interface. You need at least 2. Screen 2, boom. And this would be the registration screen. And obviously you would link it to that particular screen. Make sure that you change the link for that one. So if you make sure that you right click and you can edit the link if you've already copied it, and you can paste it to the other screen. And then we're going to go right to the top, right click here on this so that we can go and update this table of contents, update the field, and not edit the field, update the field. That's long. Update the field and entire table, please. And now you've got your IPO screens being displayed. It looks all very nice. And if you want to be fancy, you can also insert a cover page. If you really want to, you can go specify a nice little cover page if you want to make it look a little bit fancy. Okay, so that's what you can do for your thing. So have we got everything? Have we got the scenario and scope? Have you described all those things, taken those little words out, unless you got them as headings, but follow all those for paragraphs? Have we filled in our user requirements table? Do we have our navigation and flow? Have we got our data structures? Yes. Have we listed all the database details? Have we made a copy of our database in our phase 1 folder? Describing what the database is going to do, describing what the text file is going to do. Give an example of the text file, describing what the class is going to do, and fill in your class diagram. Make sure you list all your attributes and your methods. Explain what each one's doing. Arrays. What is the array going to be used for? How is the array going to look? Our graphical user interface. Have we got as many of our screens, our main screens there as possible? The IPO. Have we got all of these details about what the details, the input for the screen 1, the processing for screen 1, the output for screen 1, and then for the second screen. If you've got all those things, then what I suggest you do is go back to the rubric. Make sure that you give yourself, like, go mark yourself. Go see, have I got this? Have I done that enough? Have I done that enough? And once you've done all of that, then you know that you are ready to hand in your phase 1. So then you should have all the things for the phase 1. Any comments and feedback and so on. Okay, so that's what you can do. Another little tip, just last little tip, is at the bottom of the document, there are these little things here. So the declaration of authenticity, annexure for learner declaration, and the annexure for declaration of authenticity. So they've got these little things at the bottom. You might want to say, hey, did you get help from anyone? You can say, Mr. Long's videos gave me help, and what's the nature? Helped me with the PAT phase 1 or whatever. So you can do something like that. You could add these, if you retype them out and put them at the bottom of your document, you can do that. Or you can create a separate document, which I'll create a template for you, and then you can download that and just fill it in and then add that to your documentation. Maybe add it to your phase 2 folder so that you've got it all digitally. Okay, so there we go. So there you should be ready. Go ahead and finish your phase 1. Support the channel by being a subscriber. Leave a like, leave a comment, go to our playlist, that maybe they can give you other PAT tips that can help you with the phase 2. And remember, don't do it the long way. Do it the Mr. Long way.